Before becoming Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh made his name as an economist, teaching at the Delhi School of Economics, working at the United Nations Trade and Development in Geneva. He also studied at Oxford, Cambridge, was governor of the RBI, vice chairperson of the Planning Commission. So here really was a human being who came from a very strong academic foundation. And to talk a bit about his legacy as an economist, we've spoken so much about his time as Prime Minister, about his innings as a politician. But to speak about his legacy as an economist, I'm joined by leading economist Dr. Rathin Roy. Dr. Roy, welcome. You would have been a young economist growing up when Dr. Singh was Chief Economic Advisor, then at the Planning Commission, Finance Ministry, and ultimately Prime Minister. Looking in the rearview mirror, what do you think is the most important economic legacy Dr. Singh leaves India with?
Thank you, Rahul. Well, I must confess that I have two things in common with Dr. Singh. We went to the same college in Cambridge, and he did once take me out for dinner. Not when the economic crisis had happened, just before, when he was in Geneva with the South Commission. And neither of us worked for the World Bank or the IMF, unlike most economists. We both worked for the UN. And therefore, I think I would say that he left behind two economic legacies which have not been commented on. I'm sure many people have commented on many things. Getting India out of its first existential crisis, the nuclear deal, etc. It wasn't that. You see, Dr. Singh had this amazing ability to lead and therefore to develop teams that would work under his leadership, deliver results. And that started in 1974, when India was facing very high inflation. He was Chief Economic Advisor, and he managed to get inflation under control. Then when he was in the Reserve Bank of India, all that you see in terms of reforms of India's financial system today started when he commissioned a report by Professor Sukumar Chakrabarty on the working of the Indian financial system, whose implementation over the next 10 or 15 years has led to India having a modern financial system. And so on and so forth. But it's quite remarkable if you look at his ability to work with economists older than him. Arjun Sengupta, I.G. Patel, Bagicha Minhas, economists who were his contemporaries, Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, economists who were junior to him, Dr. Raghuram Rajan, Dr. Kaushik Basu, Dr. Monte Kaluvalia. He was able to work with all of them to deliver results for India. And that is the hallmark of a true policy leader. I think, therefore, his legacy, which is unfortunately not being taken up by any of his successors, was to act and behave like a leader in the policy domain and to get others to work with him. That requires two things, which he had in abundance. It requires great confidence in your own technical and analytical capabilities, which he had in good measure. And it requires a very large ego to be able to work with others and give them credit. And he did both. And I think that would be his most important legacy, to the fact that until very recently, India's economy was regarded to be in very competent and capable hands, multiple competent and capable hands. That is a legacy, unfortunately, which has been tarnished now, but that is what I will remember him by.
Dr. Roy, his critics would say he was an overrated economist and underrated politician. Just looking at, his dissertation on Indian exports and trade, and looking just at his academic ability as an economist, where would he stand? You mentioned a lot of his peers, some juniors as well. Where would he stand in your esteem as an economist?
Well, you see, his academic career, in fact, like mine, was very short. It's a rite of passage in economics. You go into academia, you get tenure, and then if you want to do other more interesting things, you leave. So as an economist, he did what academic economists stop at, which is he was competent in his plumbing, in his use of technical tools, and he had developed a good analytical capabilities. But as an economic policy practitioner, what I call tradecraft of economic policy and practice, he was hugely successful. I think also, if I may, Rahul, this binary that I know my own community of economists using, bad economist, better politician, I think it's false. I think he was a good economist because he had no illusions about being a politician. He was what I call unelectable. There have been many in our history, unelectables, but unlike today's unelectables, and unlike some unelectables in his own party, his domain expertise and his ability to crisis manage and to deliver prosperity was why he was put in a job. So he was crystal clear. He became finance minister because India was in the middle of an existential financial crisis and he had to resolve that. He did that with the Prime Minister's full cooperation and the inputs of many others who he himself is acknowledged. Job well done. He was appointed as Prime Minister in 2004, not because he was electorally, any one day, but because he was deemed to be the only person who could actually manage a diverse political coalition and deliver results. He was lucky, in my view, in only one respect. Everyone needs a bit of luck, but he made the most of it, which is in 2004, well, for a long time, the Congress Party had lost its ideology. It had no ideology at all. And he was not a threat to anybody, so he was able to use his economic credentials to deliver an ideological approach to the party, which has been responsible for the much of the prosperity India saw. And again, never forget, manage crises for India very capably, very effectively. He then branched out and used that domain expertise to make the most of his foreign policy background, both in the South Commission and in the UN, and delivered us a nuclear deal and much better relations with our neighbors than we unfortunately have now. These, I think, are what made him, I think, one of India's foremost practitioners of economic policy tradecraft, and therefore I think the Economist politician binary is wrong, and it's not really relevant. I mean, sure, he was good. So are thousands of professors in thousands of universities all over the world. There are as many professors as there are probably IAS officers in India. One doesn't remember any of them for being professors or IAS officers. One does remember Dr. Manmohan Singh, and his portrait hangs in St. John's College, in the hall in St. John's College, not because he was professor of something, but because he was one of the world's foremost practitioners of economic policy, more in the tradition of Keynes, the economist in Treasury, who never held an academic job in economics, than in the tradition of, more run-of-the-mill academics from universities that you hear about and forget in a minute.